Yeah, I'm getting stronger.
So I'm excited to be able to partner with you. For real. I love this. I love this.
So we can get stronger.
Become aware of your thoughts. To be a fit individual, you have to become aware of what you're thinking on a daily basis.
It's so weird. It sounds
Right.
weird.
It sounds crazy, but
Makes me really happy to hear that. Keep strengthening. Welcome to Strong Home, where we're focused on strengthening the family unit. And guys, if this episode doesn't bring you a level of hope for your family, I'm not exactly sure what will. And the reason I'm saying that is because we have a really, really special guest today. Someone that is near and dear to our personal family unit, John, also known as Yao. And our personal connection that we have is that John is actually my former husband of 15 years. So for all of us to be able to sit here together and have a conversation in regards to strengthening the family unit and focused on how to be able to navigate through boundaries and healing and hope for your family and for our family, I'm really, really, really happy and excited for this specific episode. I know there was a time where it was really difficult for us to be able to just communicate in general. Based off of course, you know, when you go through a divorce, when you go through any type of a breakup or a separation, it's really hard. It's like if you're separating or if you're breaking up, you're not doing it for a good reason. So there's usually a lot of different types of pain involved and history involved there. So we definitely had a lot of that. And it came to a point where we still had to co-parent with our baby, with our daughter. So what was beautiful is that there was a person that we had, you guys are familiar with him also, Dr. Jason Plunkett, who was someone that we were able to connect with for I don't know if you call it counseling, therapy, we like to call it processing. When one time we went out to eat right after we got married, and Jason says to us, so guys, how is marriage? How do you like marriage life? And I was like, oh, it's great. I'm so thankful. Praise God, you know, second chances. Let's just, you know, I'm like really excited about it. And then he goes over to Jeff and he says, so how's marriage life? And he was like, and he did a whole bunch of blinking and pausing. And I'm like, you're not answering fast enough. What's going on? And he was like, well, look, I mean, I appreciate her. You know, I'm thankful that we got married. All this is great. But I'm not really used to sharing and, you know, to sharing my spouse. And he was like, I still feel like we're kind of in this little triangle thing where they haven't, meaning John and I hadn't learned yet how to be able to communicate with one another on a healthy, positive level. So Dr. Jason says to us, you know what? He says, Melissa, I've never told you what to do in all these years of me knowing you. You've known me for like 7 years at that point. And he said, but I'm going to tell you what to do this time. He said, I am going to tell you that you should not be communicating directly with John. And I looked at him like, that's not even going to make sense. Like, we have a baby, we have to communicate. And he's like, no, what I mean by that is you now have a covering. He was talking about Jeff. And he said, so I want to encourage you to just have Jeff to reach out to John. You guys do 3-way texts, do 3-way emails, and allow Jeff to be kind of that mediator. He didn't use that word, but it's basically what he was saying, where you guys can speak to one another and be able to have a really good conversation with each other without all of the hurt and the pain and the history. Because now what you have is someone that can moderate and hold you guys accountable. And I think that, Jeff, I don't know if you thought that I was going to be like, no, this is a horrible idea. Did you think that I wouldn't want to do it?
yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I thought it would be not only difficult for you to do it on your own, but I thought you probably would think it would be an issue from Yao.
And I did at first. I definitely thought that for sure. And I remember feeling like, okay, I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work at the initial thought of it. And then I sat back and I was like, this actually would take off a lot of pressure because I'm not good at this. I don't know how to navigate through this. I don't know how to communicate in a healthy way. And there's been enough pain, there's been enough hurt. Let's figure out how to do this. And so that day, I literally at that dinner table felt like this huge weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I left it at the table and I walked away. And we actually were able to do this, but not because I was an amazing person and I figured it out, but more so because you were really mature about this. And you were able to step back and say, you know what? I don't have all the history and all the pain that you guys did. And I do see that you literally like, y'all are kind of immature and you need to work with each other a little bit better. So you ended up actually reaching out to him, right?
Well, yeah, we had already kind of started some dialogue, you know what I mean, to build a bridge. And by the time we got to that point, there was at least a working relationship where, you know, we could exchange, whether it was a text or even on a phone call to talk. So by the time we got to that suggestion that Jason made, it wasn't difficult. Before that, there was some us getting used to each other and us filling each other out. And, you know, Yao had to, where I came from, I understood that Yao had multiple things going on with you that was its own thing. but he has a daughter that is going to be living with another guy. So I came from the perspective of, I didn't have a daughter, I have a son. But if I did have a daughter, let me put myself in his shoes. How would I feel about that? So that made it easier for me to kind of get out of my own ego, or out of my own self, to be able to have an opportunity to talk to him and relate to him, where it wasn't, oh, you know, we had to have this ego, or you're my wife, or his daughter lives with me now. It was more of a thing like, man, I do understand what it's like to kind of have to surrender and just trust God that my daughter's going to be okay. And so with that, that made it easier for us to talk.
Was that hard
I
for
think
you?
he came practical. He was practical in his communication with me. You know, initially I was like, better control your woman, man. She over here bothering me, you know, because we had this energy that was protruding between us. But I think one of the good things is understanding context. It took me a while to figure out context. You know, maybe being a person from African immigrants and coming into America and understanding American culture, right? So there were certain things that I had to work through on my own because my parents had passed, right? So you were the only family I had. So the pain has so many different avenues to it. And on the outside, people looking in, it's going to look like, oh, you guys need to grow up, or you got to, but there was parts of my soul that was immature that I still needed to navigate through. So when Jeff came through and began to communicate with me, he communicated from a practical standpoint. So it made it a little easier for us to sit down. I remember we went to, what was it? It was in Burbank, right? That like by the Burbank 15, the movie theater.
Oh, you mean like Yard House?
Yeah, Yard House.
Exactly, exactly.
Yard
yeah.
House.
Yeah, we had lunch.
Yeah, and just some of the practicalities of understanding where you're coming from. Like, okay, I can see that. Yeah, that's probably not cool. So we were able to develop a relationship around that. So
I had a very newfound respect for you for the way that you handled him with having that conversation, because I was still kind of getting to know you in certain situations. Like our marriage was fairly new at the time. This is why it was still going, like my transition from going from a 15 to 20 year long relationship, and we just coming straight out of college into a marriage, right? Not really knowing like, okay, how am I supposed to be a wife? What does this look like? And navigating through that. And then going from that to a divorce and now trying to figure out, wait a second, well, who am I? Where am I? I don't know what I am without this. And then meeting you and having a totally different perspective on like, oh, okay, let me figure out how to be healthy. He was so huge on respect. And you know how I grew up, didn't have a whole lot of like respect in relationships. And so he came from a very different perspective on, okay, let me teach you what respect is and what that looks like. So I thought I was respectful because I didn't curse at him. I didn't yell at him. We weren't. So I was like, I'm respectful. What do you mean? I have other people that curse at each other and I don't do that. And he had a totally different level of respect, or what he required for respect. So I remember having conversations with him where I would realize like, okay, I was nervous at first. He's going to go talk to you. I was like, okay, but you know what? He's a respectful person. He's huge on respect. But I was like, how are you going to respond to that? And when he came home and was like, this was great. Like it worked out really well. He said, he had told you, you know what, listen, we have a common thing here, the baby, right? We both want her to be strengthened. We want her to grow strong and, you know who she is and all of that. We want to be a family to be able to provide like a village for her. So we can either be enemies or allies. Like I specifically remember those words, enemies or allies. Let's figure out how to do this together. We don't have to do it like the world has done it, where we're battling each other. And instead we can do this in community together. So I respect both y'all for doing that.
Well, it really was easy from my perspective, because if I would have met him on the street, I might have hung out with him. The only thing that would have been any issue was because you guys were married and you had a daughter. When you take that off the plate and just put that to the side for a second and say, okay, who is he as an individual? He has done nothing to me, right? He has not offended me in any way. Yeah. You guys have created offenses against each other. Some things you have done and some things he has done. I had nothing to do with that, right? So I could remove myself from the past hurt and trauma that you guys have caused to each other and say, the way I grew up, I would never be his friend. But as a mature adult, I have to look beyond what I was taught. I was taught that he would be an enemy, that I would never be able to trust him, right? But in reality, he's a good guy. I'm just listening to stories that you've told me, and now he's telling me stories. And if I just go by the stories, it would seem like he's not the best person. Or if I listen to stories from him, you're not the best person. So I had to put all of that aside and say, okay, what is the best way to move in this area? Brand new to me. Yeah. It was totally brand new, but I knew that we got to be together for some time, right? And we have to make this work. And so it was worth me laying it down to make it work.
And the ego too, right? Because as a man, you know, as an alpha African man, when you've cut something off, at least in my culture, the person almost doesn't exist anymore, right? But you have to think beyond yourself. My daughter, she's so important to me. She's so important to you. So I had to ask myself, all right, how do you salvage a situation? And that's what people have a hard time doing, is thinking beyond the present and thinking contextually. Like scripture talks about the sins of the father or the blessings going to the third and fourth generation. So even in different colonial spaces, whether it be the Willie Lynch, he knew if I could separate these two, it'll go for 300, 400 generations. So everything we're doing in principle is going to impact our great grandchildren. So if I'm living by that, I have to get outside of the moment and say, my daughter's future, because she already has experienced a fracture in the brokenness of a relationship, which is difficult, it doesn't just impact me and you, it impacts her. How do I now try to salvage it as best as possible so that she sees the right representative of what a family unit, traditional family unit, and then you have a blended family, as they call it. How can two men operate who are alpha males and still have respect for one another and care for the tribe? That's how we did it in the past. That's the village. That's a part of my Yao, finding myself and being able to operate in those spaces. So those principles are what guided the emotional part. And if you live by principle, you can retrain your emotions and mature them. And that emotional intelligence begins to kick in. So that was a huge part of me growing and becoming more comfortable with, all right. And then she's going to high school. We got to get this together. This little petty stuff is, beyond. So, but it takes time, and it depends on how you move in the divorce as well. Yeah. I think we tried to salvage. We talked to Dr. Jason. We were sitting with other individuals who was helping navigate, although the emotion was still strong, we were able to, stand on principle. And that's when the waves came and the storms beat on the house, but we were set on some sort of a foundation that after it's said and done, Most High's glory is still here. Yeah. We're able to grow it out.
Yeah. And I think it was such an opportunity, right? Where for the most part, I've lived the life I wanted to live. I lived a selfish life, right? Mm-hmm. And then start to come into the understanding of what God, how he wants me to live as a man. It was like, you can have a huge opportunity to be a bridge between two people that were hurt, mm-hmm. right? I don't know the actual levels of hurt, but I knew there was some hurt there. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't want to live in a home where my new daughter and my new wife, they're hurting, right? And whether it was things that she had did or things that you had did, there was pain, there was trauma there. And so I was like, okay, I can really have an opportunity to help her heal. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the main things, is that, I think I said this to you, is that entrepreneurs, we have to be in a mindset that we have to take care of our mental, mm-hmm. emotional, and spiritual, as well as our physical, but we have to be in a position where we can take and capitalize on opportunities. And if we're stressed out, if we're angry, if we're upset, we could miss opportunities. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I need peace. And it was more important for us all to have peace than for one person to be right. Mm-hmm. And that's what was important to me.
Yeah, that clicked for me, and I understood that. You said it as a man to a man, like, I need peace in the house, bro. Mm-hmm. I'm like, all right, man, I get it.
Because we didn't have it for so long, so you knew what that felt like.
Yeah, peace is important.
It's important to have. And what I really appreciate and love, and you mentioned this about, partnering together for our daughter, is that now we've even been at a place where all three of us are a part of disciplining her or a part of guiding her in different ways, to the point where we'll do family Zooms, where it's like, okay, you know what? She did something that she probably should have did a little bit differently. We all are going to get together, get on a Zoom with her and have a conversation. So she knows that we're partners. She knows that you're not going to get away with something when you're just at dad's house, when you're just with Jeffrey. This is not just, it's going to be all of us together. We're all on the same page. So it goes beyond just having, like you said, ego. Put your ego aside so that you have the place and the position in the child's life to be able to help them grow and to help them even respect you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think just in this culture as well, like everything is so self-driven, materialistic, right? So it makes it very difficult for children to be raised in a traditional environment because we're all go-getters. We got to go do this. We got to do this. Then something's going to suffer, right? So the relationships suffer. So that's why it takes a village, even more so now, who has, a moral compass to say, you can pursue things, but it shouldn't pursue you. You shouldn't control you. You need to control it. So whenever she veers off, she has 3 perspectives, right? From different walks of life, different vantage points. Me coming from American African. So I have still a little bit of that. That's a good jewel there. He has his perspective. You have your perspective. Now she has culture. She has understanding. So I'm of the persuasion, not just punishing children, but helping them logically assess what is happening, where they went wrong, how they could have done it better, or what choices did they have, and then being able to move. And you saw last time when she had some issues and she put out a whole report and deck and a whole
she wrote a whole proposal to us.
Right. And I knew you were going to say this. So for 30 minutes, I'm going to do this. Like, that's my daughter.
Yeah. And it's funny because you're like, oh, like you're not happy with the decision she made, but you're really happy with the way that you've raised her to handle that as a result of it. So I really am thankful for that. And then watching, that is one thing that you taught me with even raising her. There's a time when I would have her on, like she would watch something on TV and I'd be like, no, shut that off. You can't watch that. And, I would ask you, like, why are you letting her watch that? And you'd be like, no, because this is only one part, or it's not like the whole thing is full of it. I'm going to sit right next to her and explain to her why this isn't right, why this is wrong. I'm not going to just let the world tell her, because eventually someday she's going to watch something like this. Mm-hmm. And it changed my perspective. And now I literally operate from that position where I tell that girl everything. And what I mean by that is if she has a question, I don't care what the question is, I will answer the question and accurately as best as my possible ability, because if she's asking, she's old enough to know the answer. If she's watching something, if she sees something, she gets exposed to something, she's old enough to know what that is and why it might not be helpful or effective or anything of that nature. Just because I don't want, she's going to find out, and I don't want her to find out from someone who's going to teach her the wrong way. Mm-hmm. So that's really been a huge help. And now I even take that into, we do teen talk with a bunch of students, other kids. And we do the same thing where we'll teach them that, it's important for you to understand these things. And then we do parent talk with those parents of the teens. And we'll say, hey, guys, I know these are uncomfortable conversations. Mm-hmm. Please don't just send them to us so that we teach them these things. Mm-hmm. You guys need to be open and comfortable with having these conversations, because if they're asking, they're exposed to it. And mm-hmm. trust me, like, these kids are open and honest and blunt with us anyway on things that they're struggling with and stuff that they're experiencing. So it's a lot.
I mean, the internet has caused them to grow so much, but they don't have experience. So there's like, oh, I have all this information and it sounds like I'm mature, but they haven't had experience to match it, or wisdom, right? So the principle I've gone by is spirit, root, fruit, right? Mental. How are you thinking? So I would go through everything. Like sometimes you'll ask her, where'd you learn that word from, Daddy? Like, because I know that they're going to tell you in school, because I was in school and I was raised in the DC area. So right. we know at 9 years old what type of information you're exposed to. I mean, I'm sure in Boston as well. So teaching her PG-13, obviously, or PG, within her context and framework, helping her understand these principles. So when she engages the vulgarity of sensuality or the perversion of sensuality, she understands that sex is not bad, but to approach it the way I'm going to approach it, or the way they're telling me to, is going to cause these sorts of ramifications. So if I make the choice to do it, I understand what I'm doing. So I hold her accountable to what you understand. You made that choice. You knew not to do A, B, C, and D. So I think that's really important to teach children principle, so that scenarios come up, they can decipher, critically think through it, and make better decisions.
Yeah.
So how would you say working together to create the boundaries has become more effective?
Oh, I mean, we're sitting here. This is the first, like, this worked. It worked. And it's still working. It's still
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. That's what I want to say. You're right. It's a work in progress.
But it's
still
grown leaps and
continue to
bounds.
work. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm very thankful for that. I think taking the position of humility, taking the position of relinquishing all of the whatever you experienced in the past, not bringing up those past grievances. It's important to heal from them, though. So I think a lot of it was putting in the work individually for me. I mean, I can't answer for you.
Well, I think too, obviously there's a level of maturity, right? And even when there's that moment where you want to be immature, you realize there's something more important. So the point of having our daughter as the focal point took all of the weight off of all of the other stuff, right?
It did.
So making that the most important thing, as opposed to the hurts or the deception or the pain and the trauma, because when you let that be the focus, wherever the focus is, the energy is going to flow, right? So before it was what you did to me, and sometimes the child becomes the pawn or the tool, right, that you use against each other. And I think for a while, you may have unconsciously used her as a way to kind of manipulate each other in different situations. But when you have an opportunity now to say, okay, let's make her the focal point and let's make her being the best version of herself our job and our duty. Now we can't be immature because it's going to be a reflection through her. And so once we started doing that, and once you guys started doing that, that's when I saw like the conversation change, the tone change. There was more spirit involved as opposed to, because a lot of times you would start a conversation and before you know it, you're in your feelings or you're in your flesh and the spirit wasn't able to guide you guys. And I think I was just there to be a kind of like a compass, as you said earlier, to kind of just point it. I'm a pointer. Hey, take the focus off. Hey, it's not that big of a deal. I know there's lots of trauma, but it's some of the stuff y'all went through, it's going to take time because those are wounds. And just, you know, as we talked about on other episodes, sometimes those wounds don't heal easily, right? And so, but you got to patch them up and make the focus the daughter. And when you guys did that, that's when I saw the growth in you guys.
Yeah.
Really.
There was a lot of healing that needed to happen, but I also think that it probably, tell me what you think about this. I think it probably wouldn't have happened if we didn't put the work in individually. And I'm saying that because there were times that you would have to check me and be like, that was really disrespectful, or no, he's right. You do need to. And so if I come now and start fighting you because you're on his side, then, and all you're doing is just showing me like, I'm just being honest, like you're not always right here. You know, you got to kind of check yourself. And then me having to step back and put that work in and say, okay, let me work on this. Let me change that. What do you think? How can someone do what we've done if only one person is willing to work on it? Because you still have the other person who's now like, oh, I keep trying and he just won't listen, or she's just not doing it. Like, how do you still bring that hope?
Well, sometimes it's time, right? And then what type of work are you putting in individually? You said there's got to be the individual work, right? So whether it's y'all working on himself or you, Melissa, working on yourself, and I'm just using that as an example, any couple out there or any relationship out there, you have to decide, I want to be better, right? And that whatever has happened in the past, I'm not going to continue to bring that into the now. That's one thing that was happening, is that the conversation could be about what school she's going to go to or her birthday or whatever. And in some point in that early on, it would be something that I could hear, something, a trigger, because you guys had triggers. You've known each other so long, you could easily trigger each other, right? And some of it was conscious and some of it was unconscious. And me as a mediator, I'm just sitting there like, oh, they just that trigger just was set off and they're going to go down this road. Let me kind of jump in and kind of guide it back. But the work is the part is that, okay, I'm in the moment now. I'm in the now. We may have issues that are 5 or 10 years back, but I'm going to make a decision not to bring that into this conversation. This conversation is about what school she's going to go to and what's the best decision to make. Let's have a separate conversation about what happened the other day or last year. And when you can say, okay, I have to allow myself to decrease and allow God to increase in this moment. That's where most people fail, is because they, what do you call it? deflect, right? You did something and you're bringing a point that needs to be made, and he may deflect, or vice versa. He's making a point that is valid, and then you deflect. And so the point that's valid doesn't even get worked on. So the work of it, working on the individual is number one. Because if you're not healthy and you're not healthy, you're bringing a half healthy person to a whole person's conversation, or he's whole and you're not healthy. So I think that each individual needs to take some time, introspective, evaluate this conversation that I'm about to go into, or this topic that I'm about to talk about. I have to stick to the script of this particular topic. We have to set another time to talk about all these other things. And that's where our relationship has helped me to do that too, because I didn't even realize at times that it's easy to veer off. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? We're talking about this thing, and then I'm not healed from the two other things. And so I'm bringing that in because you're making great points, and it feels like you're knocking me down. Mm-hmm. And that's what we have to get over, is that even though you may be making a valid point, it's really making me better. Or you may be making a valid point, it's making me better to listen to that point. But I didn't have the confidence to say what I needed to say before, and now I do, and I'm bringing it up in the wrong conversation. I think a lot of couples do that.
I do too. Real quick, what was your turning point for you into peace, like together? What do you think?
Yeah, like you said, the personal work and doing an assessment of myself from a DNA standpoint. I know that's going a little deeper, but I think when we realize who we are, right? We hear that, oh, I know who I am. Well, who are you? Like from a genetic standpoint, what's your background? What is the chemistry? What are your people like? Where are you? Okay, you're from the continent of Africa. Okay, what country, what part? What's the history of your people, right? So you begin to understand from a macro how it impacts the micro. So that's what I went through. I began to do more of that deeper study of who are you? Oh, where do you come from? Oh, your family's Italian, or your family's this, or your family, oh, okay. So I begin to understand, okay, well, how are these people? Oh, okay. Then it begins to streamline. And for me, going into the past is important, because once you can sit in the past, remove yourself emotionally, like you said, and look at it like third party, then you can, okay, I was tripping right there. I see why I'm responding that way. Oh, I did that in this circumstance. Because usually when I talk about things of the past, I'm trying to make a through line. Like, you see when we bought that car, the blue one, when I said this, you're doing it right now. And then he'll hear that and be like, y'all gotta let the past go, which is true, but we're trying to process our different types of proclivities and ways of being based on past things, but we haven't done the personal work. So I began to get into community with older men who could help me understand, son, you tripping because da-da-da-da-da, you need to do this and that. Okay, because I could see the relatability in the principle. So I'm like, principle stands, or the word stands. My emotion is based on context or based on my perception, and which is blinded because I have my own barriers, there's so many different factors. So once I began to realize that life isn't as clear as we may want it to be, I learned that in it all, you have to walk gracefully. That's where the humility comes in, because you don't have all of the perspective points when you come to see something, because you're influenced. There'll be times where he'll say something, I'm like, oh, that's because of course he's going to see it from her standpoint. So I'm the third wheel out. And then you'll tell me that. I'm just saying, that's how I could feel, right? But
you're on your side, buddy.
But then I'll hear how he'll say things, and I'll hear him and I agreeing on a lot of stuff, like, yeah, like Jeff has said, yeah, and then, so then, okay, he's living by principle, so I can respect that. And then I feel more comfortable with my daughter. I'm like, okay, I see the way he operates. I see how he treats her. Then I can respect that, because men always feel uncomfortable when another man is you on Zulu at all times. Like, if I had to come through, that type of energy that I had to work through. So there was different components, but learning to be balanced from a principle standpoint, understanding the different people groups involved, different perspectives, where you came from, where I came from, where he's coming from, the little that I know. All these things played a vital role in the way that we built a stronger family unit and worked through it personally, so it became easier in the context of the group.
And this is an amazing thing, right? Because I'm in it, and then it's like an out of body experience all the time, right? So it's like I'm a part of the thing. It's like our consciousness, our sub and our objective mind and our subjective mind. It's like a thought, but you're able to analyze the thought. So sometimes I'm in the moment and then I'm analyzing it at the same time. Like, man, there really is an amazing move of God, the Most High, when you can get out of yourself to really do something better, right? And having our daughter be the thing that we are focused on, it allows you to not be in self, right? And when you can get out of self, we can do amazing things, because we're spirit more than we're flesh, but we are in this body and we start to get caught up in the flesh of it. And when you start to sit back and be like, man, this is amazing. I would have never thought in any time in my life that I would ever be in a situation like this. But I can see how it's helping me grow, helping us grow, and how it can really help the world.
Other people grow.
Yeah.
And part of that is taking that responsibility too. Because I know, like you said, you realized he was a decent person, basically. He was a good guy. But as men, you'd be like, who's around my kid? What does that look like? And you told me something a long time ago, and it really made me angry. Like, it pissed me off, actually. And then I had to sit back and be like, oh, get it. Because you said, you know, he's cool. But I didn't know that at first, because you were so busy making really bad decisions before that.
I said that to you?
Yeah, you told me. You don't remember that. I'm glad you don't remember. That means we're healed, guys. You said something like, you made such bad decisions. I'm so used to you making bad decisions. I just thought he was another bad decision. So you were not aware of him at the time. You had to really get to know him on your own. And then when you realize, like, okay, we're all for, you know, this one focus of raising a healthy daughter. Now I can be on board. Now I can be in a position to teach.
And it's still like raising kids. You raise them, there's a level at 10, there's a level at 13, there's a level at 16. So there's always, as parents, blended families and co-parenting, you still got to check in, right? Just because a guy is good at one point, you still got to have checks and balances. We still got to, you know, be open to be checked and be open to be where you can observe me, right? From a far or up close, because this is a lifelong journey. It's not at 18 or 21. This is a lifetime of imparting into you guys' seed. And so I'm open to that. And that's what, whether you're the ex or the new or the present, there has to be that understanding that you got to get checked all the time. And you got to be open to that, because at any moment, somebody could go off, and be willing and open-minded and say, all right, I'm here for the betterment of this and not just when it feels good.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Guys, this is the first time that we've sat here and had this conversation. So it's not like we've been cool for a minute and, hey, can you come have this conversation? This is literally the first time we're having this conversation. And I'm excited, seriously, that we could do this. This is something I've wanted to do for a very long time, but it's timing, right? Like you said, there was time.
I wasn't for it at first.
You weren't at first. I don't know about that. But the reason we did is because this is Strong Home. Guys, we're not just talking and telling everyone else to do this. This is something that we're all doing together, and we're really literally living it. And that's why I said, if this episode does not bring hope to other families, I'm not sure it will, because there was hurt here. There was a lot. And someday we'll get into all of that, where, you know, there's different changes that need to happen in order for us to grow together. But we are here, and we're continuously progressing to grow. And you guys can do the same thing. Strong home, right? Creating and building strong homes, strengthening the family unit. Keep strengthening.
If I could say one last thing, I think, like you said, the common denominator with all three of us is that we have a relationship with the Father.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to do this.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can't do it in your own strength.
At all.
It's just not going to go down.
At all.
But when you have the power of the Most High with you, then you become the witness of the glory. And then your children see that, and then it goes to their children. What is our daughter going to say to her seed, you know, about, well, how was grandma? How was grandpa? How was, oh, well, healing. Yeah. Now that's passed down. Yeah. That's better than the easy route, which is take a gun and shoot somebody. It's easy to do that. Yeah. Can you put the gun down and communicate with them and become cool with somebody? Yeah. That's superpower.
Yeah. Superpower.
Right. Superpower.
Yeah, superpower.
Yeah, 100%. Any situation that arises, we can rise above it. It's just choice. It's your choice. Yep. So if you choose to be mad, I can be mad at him. I have that choice, but what is that going to profit?
Yeah.
It's not a good investment.
Yeah.
So you have to be mature enough, emotionally mature, and shift. And like you said, it takes time. Time is a beautiful thing if you know how to use it right.
That's great.
And we've been granted some time, so thank God.
You're right.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so
Mhm.
thankful for both of you guys for doing this.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Official handshake, like
Yeah.
the diplomats.
Official
You know?
Yes, sir.
handshake.
Yes, sir.